like when we release a game, we don't fully understand it, right? Like we have our concept of what it is and what we think is special about it, and we put it out there, and then through other people playing it and talking about it and all sorts of stuff, we learn more about it and ourselves. Like to me, that feels like the goal of making art.
Any kind of art. Yeah, I think if you're just creating stuff, like if you're making stuff and putting it out there intentionally, you want people to react to it and perceive it and see what it means to them. It's not really yours anymore.
And the place it takes in the stream. The Gaia stream from Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Sifter, a video game industry interview show. I'm Chris Button. Scaling the mountain of Celeste, I'm joined by Maddy Thorson and Noel Berry to talk all things platforming, narrative, and what comes next after making a global hit. "2D platformers are as pure as gaming gets. Technology may have evolved over the years, but the thrill of conquering a well-crafted level filled with precise jumps has never gone away. Few games capture the elation of overcoming adversity as well as Celeste, a game that's as much as about overcoming self-doubt as it is about scaling its eponymous mountain. Winning Independent Game of the Year at the Game Awards in 2018, Celeste also happens to be one of my favourite games. Today, I'm joined by Maddy Thorson and Noel Berry of Extremely OK Games ahead of their event at ACMI during Melbourne International Games Week. Maddy and Noel, welcome to Lightmap and thank you so much for your time. To start with, what brings you to Australia and what are you keen to share about Celeste with the local fans here in Australia?
Yeah, we're coming for the ACMI event. ACMI invited us to do sort of this panel discussion, I guess. And I don't know, it just felt like if someone invites you, someone like ACMI invites you to do something like that, you should take them up on it.
Yeah,
It's a good opportunity.
Yeah, it'd be fun to just talk about Celeste development and what made the game what it is and everything, and
yeah, and what it's sort of become in the public consciousness, I guess.
Absolutely. And I'll be very keen to touch on that because Celeste does mean quite a bit to a lot of different people. But continuing the ACMI theme for the moment, I know that Celeste also features as part of ACMI's Game Worlds exhibition, which looks at the history and the cultural impact of a wide range of games. And I know Celeste features particularly as part of its appeal to the speedrunning community. And I'm curious seeing that speedrunners have taken Celeste as a bit of a favourite. Did it occur to you during development, or was there a stage during Celeste development or post-release that you realised that, hey, this actually has a very strong appeal and a very strong hook to the speedrunning community?
yeah, I mean, so before the big version of Celeste we made a smaller version called Celeste Classic now. It was a Pico 8 game, and we made that in 2015. And that was actually run at various like speedrunning events, like Summer Games Done Quick. And we saw that and talked to some of the speedrunners involved in that. And that definitely, we considered that quite heavily as we worked on the larger version of the game, because we liked what they were doing. We thought it was really cool and we wanted to, facilitate that. So I think pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah. I think we were also really inspired by GDQ events. We had been watching them for years at that point and always thought like, oh, we want to make a game that's like kind of designed to be speedrun. So it was always inspiring to us. And we'd be remiss not to mention the sound designer for Celeste, Kevin Rigamy, was an avid speedrunner and speedran the game in development, gave a lot of feedback that helped shape it.
And you touch on that original early version of Celeste, the Pico 8 version, and I'm curious, what inspired that early version of Celeste, and then what led to it snowballing into the full version, the larger scale version of the game that we know today?
That kind of came from just wanting to play around with Pico 8, which is a game development tool to make small video games like a fantasy console. So it's like it has all these limitations, kind of like you would think about for like a Nintendo, like the first Nintendo Entertainment System. It has all these limitations, kind of like that. And I saw that on the internet somewhere and asked Maddy if she wanted to make something for fun in it over a weekend. And that just kind of turned into Celeste. We kind of, took the limitations of what this thing could do and kind of explored that and that turned into Celeste.
Yeah, we were really inspired by the limitations, I would say. I think constraints have always been a really big part of our process, and just so Pico 8 was very alluring to us because of the tight constraints it had.
Sort of similar to my speedrunning question from before, was there a moment when you're working on Celeste that you could possibly begin to fathom that it would have the success and the reception that has since enjoyed?
I think not really for like, you never really know how successful it's going to be, but I do think there was a moment for me where I realized we were making something special, and that was when we got to the end of chapter 6, Reflection, where Madeline and Madeline make up. And at that moment, I just felt like, okay, we have something here. Like, this is something worth playing. Yeah, you still never really feel like it's gonna be a success, but you do the best you can.
Yeah, you kind of hope that you're making something that people will like a lot and stuff, but you don't know how much traction it's going to get, or whether people will respond the way you hope and stuff. So I mean, yeah, we had ambitions, I guess, but definitely we weren't expecting, I think, definitely the scale at which it did perform.
Yeah.
Impacted people.
One of the things that's really stuck with me since I originally played Celeste back in 2018 was how beautifully and how cleverly interwoven its gameplay and narrative was, in terms of how Madeline's struggles mirrored the challenge of the precision platforming, which in turn fed into this really nice loop of her growth as a character. And so I'd love to know, could you please tell me more about this synergy between the narrative and the gameplay, and how it came about? Did one come before the other, or did the narrative and gameplay sort of emerge organically together?
So I have been a huge fan of platformers pretty much my entire life, and I've made a lot of hardcore platformers. So Celeste was not sort of outside of my usual wheelhouse. Gameplay wise, narratively, I had never written a story before like this. But so when we started the game, it was very much gameplay first. It was very much let's put all of our game design abilities and all of our artistic abilities toward making a new hardcore platformer, right? Um, and then the narrative really came out of, well, why do people do hard things? Like, what is a hard thing people do? Climb a mountain. And then why do people climb a mountain? Why do people do something so hard? Is it masochistic? Is there, like there's all these questions that come up from that. And that was really the core of the narrative. And then I would say about halfway through the project, the narrative started like was no longer the passenger; it was driving the car, right? And then the gameplay and everything else was sort of following behind the narrative at that point. So it was kind of like a push and pull.
Yeah, it was very organic, because I think we, like, the first 3 chapters mechanically were basically done before there was almost any story at all.
Yeah.
Like, you could play through up until almost the end of the hotel, and the whole game was there, but no story.
Mhm.
And then we went back and added in narrative moments that kind of fit, and
Yeah.
kind of then they pushed and pulled, and iteratively.
Yeah, you sort of like we put in some gameplay, and then we think about narrative. We put in some narrative, and then we zoom out and we think like, okay, how is this meshing? Then we go back to back and forth until it all sort of gels and harmonizes, I guess is the word.
How long did it take for you to reach that sort of harmonization and the gelling of the narrative and the gameplay? Was it something that clicked after those first few chapters, or was it, I suppose, a natural flow, or were there times where it was a challenge to blend the two, the narrative and the gameplay?
I think there was a lot of challenge. I think um, it took a long time before like most of development before the narrative was really felt like it was.
Like, there wasn't a concrete, like, oh, this is the whole narrative arc or anything. It didn't feel like that came in until quite a bit later.
Yeah.
But it had, by that, I think by the time you really started talking about the ending and stuff like that, there was kind of, by then there was a lot of like initial stuff, and a lot of the characters were kind of there. But I think the overall, like, how does the story progress was, it wasn't an immediate it wasn't there from the beginning, certainly.
Yeah, we didn't know going in what the ending was going to be or when. Yeah.
Because it was kind of, the whole game kind of pulled out of the Pico 8 version of the game. And that version didn't have any narrative. It had the character, it had the mountain, and it had this kind of like whimsical vibe, and it had this like, it had the memorial with this, talking about the people who perished up the climb, but it didn't have any kind of like narrative besides that. It just kind of had vibes. So that's where the larger game came from, and originally was basically just that as well. And then the story kind of grew as we worked on it.
Yeah, and then in like always in sort of game design or any creative effort, the story grew larger than it needed to be, and then had to be trimmed back, and just like the gameplay did.
Yeah,
and until you find that sweet spot of where it's just right.
In retrospect, having since accomplished that and achieved that really beautiful mix of gameplay and the interwoven narrative, what advice would you give to aspiring game developers who are working on any sort of game where the gameplay feeds into narrative and vice versa?
That's tricky. I do think that everyone's process is going to be different. Like for us, gameplay first just makes a lot of sense because we are that kind of developer, right? Where we make these very kinetic action games. But there are a lot of games where I think the narrative can't come first and the gameplay can be designed around that. So it's hard to give, sort of a one size fits all solution, or even advice.
Yeah, I think my only advice to that kind of stuff always is to just start actually making it, and don't get hung up on the which to do first or what happens. Just be like, I'm just gonna make part of it today, even if you don't know what happens after or before or anything.
Yeah, I guess there is no right thing to do first because you don't know what the final product's going to be. And there's going to be a lot of zooming in and out and going back to things and that kind of thing.
Maddy, you mentioned a love of the feel of kinetic action games and that you've always been drawn to platformers and making hardcore platformers in particular. What attracts you to these sort of games and that level of challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think Celeste is kind of a meditation on that question, right? It's like, why do we play hard games? Like, what do I get out of it? Out of like completing a hard challenge or pushing myself to complete a hard challenge, or sometimes even giving up on a hard challenge, but it doesn't feel like it's serving me. Yeah. And honestly, I don't have like a concrete answer. I think Celeste is one answer to that question, like the self-growth and sort of self-discovery of it, I think is a very big reason. But I think there's other answers too. I think in a way, my previous game, Towerfall, is another answer to that question, right? Of like the competitive spirit and just community and just having fun. And I think there's probably more answers to that question that I've yet to find.
Noel, is that something that you share with Maddy as well? An enjoyment of these sort of hardcore platformers and that level of challenge?
Yeah, I definitely like those a lot. I think Maddy's more hardcore than I am on an average, game.
Just in general,
just across like hardcore. But no, I enjoy those games a lot too. I have a lot of fun with them. I feel like it's fun to talk about them too and what you get stuck on and those kinds of things. But yeah, I enjoy them a lot. I mean, I make games like we make because I like them.
One question that I love asking people who have worked on platformers, and it's a very broad and big picture development question in terms of what actually makes for a good platformer, whether it's 2D or 3D.
For me, like fundamental to the platformer is gravity, right? Gravity and jumping. And so to me, you can't separate a platformer from, like, that's where all the tension of a platformer comes from, is gravity. And so I guess just how the ways in which your game plays with gravity and vertical space, I think is what I would, yeah.
I don't have a good answer to that. Besides, I think I'm very atmosphere and vibes based, and I feel like you can get a lot of interesting space and exploration out of a platformer that is, that fits that genre really well. And I think that appeals to me.
Looking back to Celeste as well, in particular the aspect of challenge, and at the moment, difficulty is quite a hot topic of discussion in the games world, as it often is. It's a discussion that comes back like clockwork at regular intervals. I'm really curious as to what your respective approaches are to difficulty, given that Celeste is well known for being very hard, very challenging, but also quite fair and accommodating through its accessibility settings and the ability to instantly retry any level that you may have failed. So, what was your approach to striking that balance between, I suppose, approachability and the high level of challenge that Celeste is known for?
Yeah, I think the way we looked at it during development was that we were trying to give people the feeling of overcoming a challenge, right? Like Celeste is very much about challenging yourself, which is, going to mean different things for different people, and then pushing past your limits to overcome. Um, and because difficulty is so subjective, that we just wanted to make the game as fair and as flexible as possible to give that feeling to as many people as possible. Um, and that was kind of our philosophy behind all that.
Yeah, I think it ties into the quick retries and stuff too, where we want, like, the design was about, these specific challenges, and not necessarily like, but it gave Maddy a lot of room for level design to be like, how long is this challenge, or like what is the specific challenge here, because the retries were so fast or the levels were so small, you can kind of like, at your own discretion to design, um, how long that was part of the challenge, is how long it was, just on a singular basis, rather than, some games you might have to redo a lot more if you die or something. Yeah.
While researching for this interview, I spent a bit of time in the Celeste subreddit, which still remains a very active and very delightful haven for Celeste fans and fans of platforming in general. So, firstly, what does it mean to the two of you that Celeste has left such a lasting legacy that people still engage with today?
Yeah, I mean that's all we could ever hope for, right? I mean, like as artists, that's what you always are trying to achieve, and then yeah, it's humbling, it's flattering, it feels like winning the lottery in a lot of ways. Like,
Yeah, very fortunate.
yeah,
And just excited that people are still finding fun ways to interact with the game,
mhm.
whether it's playing it for the first time or playing it again or playing mods or speedrunning it or whatever.
Yeah,
Or
the depth to which people go into it is also like there's people who know the code, like decompile the game and know the code of it, and talk about Noel's coding style versus my coding style,
Yeah, correct
and
us say things because they know better than this.
and like that, I find that amazing.
Yeah,
I find that
that's very
incredible.
cool.
Just to know that people find our work worthy of that, or like that they get something out of it, even inspecting it at that level, right? Like we try to put that much nuance and depth into everything we do, and yeah, so it's really edifying.
And part of that legacy has also been the result of you nurturing Celeste well after its launch with DLC, updates, and for lack of a better word, remixes like Celeste 64 and some of the other smaller scale projects that you've done since. So I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about why you enjoy doing these additional bits of content or reworks of Celeste with some of the releases that you've done since.
Well, I think Farewell is separate. So the DLC Farewell, I think that came about just because we got all this feedback on the main game and just gave us all these ideas of like, oh, like we could go so much further with this game engine, with this concept, and sort of explore the characters more, explore the movement system more. And it just became something we wanted to do creatively after the success of the game. Uh, and then I think the other things just came out of the community was so lively and so like dedicated that it just made us want to give them more in the world, right?
And if we had like fun ideas about things, like for Celeste 64, it was kind of a joke almost.
Yeah.
Like what if we what if we did just make this for the anniversary? And then it sounded fun, I think.
And we had that idea like 2 weeks before the anniversary.
Yeah, so it was like, okay, let's see what we can do. But yeah, I think it just comes down to like, is there a fun idea that interacts with the community and interacts with, you know, the ideas and concept of Celeste in a fun way? Then sometimes,
Yeah.
you know,
It's like we want to be part of the community in some way, right? Like it's like the Celeste is the start of a conversation, and then we have all these people responding, and then to us, we're just like, oh, like we get an idea of how we can respond back to them so that they can respond again, and we're like, oh, we start wanting to do it, so we do it.
Yeah, and on the community aspect, Celeste also holds a very special place among the hearts of the LGBTQIA plus community, particularly trans players. And Maddy, as you've written before, it's also a very deeply personal reflection, and it's been a very deeply personal process for you. So, Maddy, what was it like for you working on this game that has since become something of a beautiful trans allegory for a lot of people?
I mean, when we were working on it, I had no idea. Like I was very much going through that stuff, but I wasn't consciously aware of it. So working on it, I was just trying to earnestly put myself into the game. That's all I was doing. And you know, like to make the narrative find some meaning in the narrative for myself, and also just to make it a meaningful narrative, right? And post release, like I think queer people and trans people definitely figured it out before I did, and sort of claimed the game, and yeah, and that helped me realize it as well. So it goes back to that conversation aspect of like releasing the game. Like when we release a game, we don't fully understand it, right? Like we have our concept of what it is and what we think is special about it, and we put it out there, and then through other people playing it and talking about it and all sorts of stuff, we learn more about it and ourselves.
It's such a fascinating concept to me, and I find it really interesting the idea of creating a work and not necessarily fully understanding it at the time. And I suppose taking players with you on that journey to fully understand the work or derive meaning from it. Is that something, is that a concept that has been a constant for the both of you during your game development careers so far, in terms of making games, putting what you can into it, and then the audience then helps you figure out its full meaning from there?
I think yes, I've always sort of been reaching toward that to, you know, much less success usually. Like I've made a lot of games since I was like 14, and you know, a lot of them didn't get there. um and that's okay. Uh I think that's like to me that feels like the goal of making art.
Any kind of art. Yeah, I think if you're just creating stuff, like if you're making stuff and putting it out there intentionally, you want people to react to it and perceive it, and you know, see what it means to them.
Yeah.
So I think there's always kind of this like back and forth with any artistic vision, whether it's video games or movies or drawing or whatever, writing. There is this kind of back and forth. And so you're always going to learn something about, I think, things you work on if you put them out there, because people will react to them differently or perceive them differently. That's just kind of part of the creative process.
Yeah, an important part, I think.
Yeah.
The post-release part of the creative process, which a lot of people forget about.
Yeah. I think you said something before, like as soon as you put something out there, it's like it's not really yours anymore. It's partially yours, but it's also partially what, you know, the perception of what everyone else kind of takes from it.
Yeah, and the place it takes in the
Yeah.
the stream. The Gaia stream from Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
In terms of projects post Celeste, and I know this is something that you've discussed publicly, that the last couple of years have been quite challenging, especially following the cancellation of Earthblade. How did you decide upon making that tough call to ultimately cancel the game?
I think it was just we'd been working on the game for a long time, and it just wasn't like really working in terms of just like mechanically, and the whole game wasn't really coming together how we'd wanted. And it was kind of felt like that thing where like to me, and it was always felt like, oh, in a month from now, it'll kind of be sorted, and we can like work on the actual game. And we kind of just said that for next month and the next month, and then that was like 3 years of being like, oh, it's really soon it's gonna feel like it's working,
Yeah.
and then it didn't. And eventually, you're kind of like, well, do we like how long do we want to keep being like it's gonna work now? And I think there's burnout there in terms of just us being like, we couldn't see the through line anymore of like this is where it's going. Which when it's Celeste, we could from the beginning. It was like we started that game, and then all the way till it was done, there was like the through line of like this is the game, and this is what's happening. And so I think with Earthblade, it just became a point where we were like, it's not this just isn't working. And how long do we want to keep trying to make it work? And versus do we just want to like, we're fortunate with Celeste, we can kind of take our time and be like, well, that's not working. Let's do something else.
It felt with Earthblade, it also kind of felt like we were trying to be something we aren't, in a sense, in that it was way more ambitious and larger scope, and the team had grown, and it felt like the experiment was failing, I guess, at a certain point.
Yeah,
And yeah,
no longer felt like something that we were excited about making, I think. And we were kind of like, well, it became a conversation of like, what are we actually excited about right now? And it wasn't Earthquake. It was other ideas we had or other things that we were excited about. And it's kind of like, well, we're in a fortunate position due to Celeste, where we can cut our losses on this. So maybe we should.
yeah,
Yeah.
very difficult decision, but ultimately the right thing to do. And really, like, what we ended up doing was splitting, like, the two of us, our ideas for Earthblade, what we were excited about. We took those and we sort of split them into 3 other prototypes and started working on those and exploring them in a more, I guess, contained and less ambitious manner that felt more doable.
On that note, there was a line that stood out to me from the Earthblade announcement, and you mentioned wanting to reclaim the joy in your creative process. How has that looked for you throughout this year in terms of reclaiming that joy?
I think we're getting there. I think yeah, I think we're like not 100% there, but I think we've gotten closer to, when we were just having fun working on Celeste or Tower Paul or even before that. Like, honestly, it kind of feels like we want to go back even before that, when we were kind of just kids working in Game Maker. Yeah, and I think we're getting there.
Yeah, kind of just finding what is fun about making games, and and trying to do that instead of because I was left with a lot of expectation and stuff about, and it's like our own doing. It's not. I'm not talking about the fans or anything, but just like what there's a lot of expectation for what we wanted to do after that, and we wanted to we'll do something bigger and more grandeur, and kind of feeling actually like scope wise, interest wise, it wasn't really exciting to us. And trying to figure out, okay, we're more interested in like what are we interested in doing? What is actually exciting, compelling on a day-to-day basis for us, which is maybe projects that are not as big in scope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like our non-creative, like our almost like type A brain taking over and being like, oh, like you made Celeste, now you can make anything. And then yeah, us realizing creatively like, oh no, we should just keep making things that are small and weird and fun for us.
Looking ahead, what are the two of you most looking forward to in your respective game development journeys?
Well, no, I mean, I'm just excited about kind of getting to the point where we can release things again, because it's been, Celeste has been 7 years since it came out. So I think we're feeling excited about these projects that we have that we're working on right now that feel like they can be finished in, a year or two, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Like because they have a smaller scope. So I'm kind of excited about, the process of making games that are smaller, just in general.
Yeah. And just getting, yeah. Yeah. And creating in a way where we can actually finish something. Yeah, I think that's that's a big part of it. Of like Earthblade had a lot of, well, back to the drawing board and like throwing things out, and that was very counter to how we used to work. I think of like just very throw stuff at the wall and like embrace the chaos, and so it's fun to get back to that. And yeah, I feel like I'm a long way on the journey of relearning to enjoy the day to day, and yeah, I'm excited to just do more of it, honestly. Make a dang video game.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about Celeste or game development in general before your Australian visit?
Excited to be there. We've never been to Australia before,
Yeah.
either of us. So excited for that.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see Melbourne and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, excited for the opportunity to be there. I think it's like a wonderful opportunity they've given us, ACMI. So yeah, we're just stoked, and I don't know, Celeste is okay, I guess.
Well, thank you so much for your time and all the very best with what's next. Maddy and Noel will be in Australia during Melbourne International Games Week for an exclusive event at ACMI on the 6th of October. Tickets are available online now.
You're listening to Lightmap, interesting conversations with video game creators.
This has been Lightmap, Sifter's interview podcast. Sifter is produced by Kyle Pauletto, Fiona Bartholomaeus, Kat Jan, Naomi Jackson, Adam Christou, and Chris Button. Mitch Lowe is senior producer, and Gianni Di Giovanni is Sifter's executive producer. Thanks to Audio-Technica Australia and Apple for their support of Sifter. Please leave a rating and/or a review on Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, or wherever you listen to podcasts, as it helps us reach more people. We'll catch you on the next episode of Lightmap.